Hey guys! I'm Maria, and I basically talk about America and its place in the world and the internet and just everything that's going on socially. Well, not everything because that would take a long time, but stuff that interests me that's going on socially. And just to get right into it, today I want to talk about simps. I, like pretty much everyone else, am spending too much time on TikTok. I've seen my fair share of like simp memes. I've listened to Drake. I know very well what a simp is. But I kind of started to wonder like what led us here. You know, where do simps come from? What even are they? Because I've heard a lot of things and behaviors and actions be referred to as simping, and I'm just a little lost. I tried to do some research, which leave it to me to turn a meme into something to research. Like, I wanted to kind of see what the origin of the simp is, and there's not a lot on the internet as far as like official research goes when it comes to simps, but basically through some research and then through just like my own experiences and patterns that I've seen, I've kind of managed to piece together a little bit about the simp. And I thought it was interesting. Maybe no one else will, but whatever. So obviously over the past couple of years, especially over the last like year, the use of the word simp has become more and more widespread. And as simp has just become this like widely used word and memed on and all this stuff, its definition has kind of evolved as well. Some of the first times when we know of simp being used was as a slang term in the 1920s. And back then it was pretty much used as a synonym for stupid. It was just like an abbreviation of the word simpleton. So it was kind of used in that context on and off. It never really took off as a widespread sort of slang term, but over the past 80 years, it's like reappeared here and there. And then in the early 2000s, its use became a little bit more widespread culturally. From 3-6 Mafia to people trolling on Drake, myself included, the word simp has reappeared over and over again in popular culture in like the 2000s. And of course, it's also begun to circle around the internet, and its origin was especially in Reddit threads and in gaming communities online. So as it became used widely on chat rooms and discussion forums on the internet, the word simp kind of stopped being used as a synonym for stupid and started to become used as a placeholder for cuck, which is short for cuckold. So the word cuckold is something that I know a lot of people use like really lightly as kind of a joke, like insult to each other, especially when gaming. But it's a word that has a really interesting history and has a really loaded kind of connotation in certain histories. So traditionally, someone who's referred to as a cuckold is a man whose wife or partner has been unfaithful to him. And back in the day, like in the medieval day, calling someone a cuckold was a really emasculating insult. The term was a very intentional way to point at and hint at a man's weakness, impotence, and just overall inadequacy. For hundreds of years, calling someone a cuckold was embarrassing and emasculating because the implication there was that he wasn't man enough to satisfy his partner, or at the very least to compel her not to cheat on him. The term cuckold is something that's not just undesirable, but that is a subject of a lot of disdain, and that's been seen over and over again in history for literally over 500 years. So I think one of the most famous examples of just how unwanted a moniker cuckold is in Shakespeare's Othello. Long story short, the villain of the story, whose name is Iago, convinces this really well-renowned warrior named Othello that his wife is cheating on him. And over the course of the play, Othello becomes increasingly humiliated and enraged to the point of madness, and he ends up killing both his wife and himself. So, kind of heavy stuff. This idea of the cuckold as someone who is emasculated and someone whose worth as a man is inherently gone has reappeared in a lot more contemporary examples than some Shakespearean play from hundreds of years ago. So there's Steve Carell's dorky character in Crazy Stupid Love, and his entire development over the course of the story is undergoing this makeover as a result of the embarrassment that he faces at being cheated on. And then you've got examples where the cuckold is portrayed as this pathetic, like little man who's times just angry and awful, like Cal in Titanic, and you're never rooting for that guy. And then there are portrayals of the cuckold as this man whose entire sense of self-worth is completely subverted by his wife's infidelity, and you see that with David in Indecent Proposal. The overarching idea, despite all of the different kind of natures of these examples, is that the cuckold is not portrayed as the guy that you want to be, you know, that you aspire to be when watching or experiencing these stories. You know, of course, as time passes and as our conversations about societal expectations become more nuanced, so do conversations about cuckolding and infidelity, especially in contemporary stories. There is no denying that any story or conversation about male or female infidelity in a contemporary sense comes with some sort of criticism. It's not like the story or the conversation is automatically signing off on the infidelity just because the person is a man or condemning it just because they're a woman. However, it is really interesting to me, traditionally and systemically, to look at the difference between how the man who gets cheated on and the man who does the cheating are portrayed in media. From Don Draper to Tony Soprano to Fitz from Scandal. It's interesting how even stories about male infidelity that don't glorify the cheating itself do seem to position the cheating as like this manifestation of the guy's manliness. The guy might be an asshole, and sometimes the story even admits that, but in the same breath, it also positions his infidelity as almost a side effect of his charm, if not a part of it altogether. My point in bringing up these two examples is that I really think they're connected. I think that the shame that surrounds cuckolds has the same roots as the acceptability and desirability of male infidelity as it's portrayed in media. And this idea of male cheaters in media and literature as being, and the idea of the hypersexual, unfaithful man being this like charming, debonair dude, it's really rooted in the idea that hypersexuality is a defining characteristic of manhood. The connection between sexual promiscuity and being a desirable man is, I think, a manifestation of toxic masculinity that we should be talking a little bit more about. It's a source of pressure in and of itself. It places an emphasis on sexual promiscuity as testament to someone's manhood. When getting laid becomes social capital, it becomes something to work for, like any other kind of capital. And what happens when you work for something? You feel entitled to compensation. Like, if you do a job, then the workplace that you've done that job for owes you compensation. And I really think that that framework can be applied to that conventional like nice guy trope. Because what does the conventional nice guy say?
Oh, I'm such a nice guy. I do so much for her. I spend so much time with her. I provide XYZ service for her, and she still doesn't want me. She's such a bitch. She's so superficial.
The implication, she's exploitative. She's failing to provide capital in exchange for labor. It's an exchange that's systematically rooted in gender norms and toxic masculinity. The only difference, of course, is that the women, and traditionally this example is a very heterosexual one, but the big difference between the workplace scenario that I just highlighted and a male-female nice guy scenario is that unlike companies, the women in these situations don't have a contractual obligation. They didn't agree to this agreement. They didn't agree to pay the social capital that is being asked of them. It seems as though societal expectations sort of signed that contract for them. These behaviors are the result of literally centuries of societal pressure that's harmful to both men and women. So, did the nice guy become the simp? Are the two different? Are they two sides of the same coin? What's the deal? I'd venture to say that the term nice guy was traditionally used by the nice guys themselves in an unironic and very sincere way. It's a very first-person perspective on the situation. For example, Jacob Black or Tom Hansen might refer to themselves unironically as nice guys. Misguided as that might be, seeing as how Tom spent over a year guilting Summer into having a relationship with him, and Jacob literally committed assault. But it wasn't until recently that the nice guy became an identifiable and called out trope and was sort of reclaimed as something that's used to ridicule the guys in question. It started to be used not in this implicitly positive, like self-pitying way by the so-called nice guys themselves, but as a criticism of the kind of entitlement that calling yourself a nice guy who can't win actually points to. So I think that where nice guy began as this like unironic self-proclamation, simp is more of a criticism of that nice guy's behavior from like a third-person perspective. For example, while Bob might call himself such a nice guy because he's at the beck and call of a girl who's just not interested in him at all, his friend Steve would probably call Bob a simp. At its core, I think the term simp is a way to call out the same exact sort of setup that the nice guy thing criticizes, just from a different perspective. Because while the self-proclaimed nice guy places the blame on the woman who slights him, the term simp drives more attention to the lack of self-respect or restraint that the so-called nice guy shows in pursuing a woman who has no interest in him. It can feel like a way to finally point the conversation away from vilifying women. Instead, it frames the nice guy's behavior and expectations as entitled and pathetic. Like anything else though, as the term has become more and more widely used, its definition has become a little bit blurrier and a little bit harder to pin down. After all, traditionally, a guy who completely ditches out his friends and gives up his hobbies and just kind of lives at the beck and call of a girl who has no interest in him might be called a simp. But what about a guy who just brings his girlfriend flowers or who shows affection in front of his friends? More and more often, male displays of devotion and affection and emotional vulnerability, even when it's in a two-sided, committed relationship to a partner, can be kind of clowned on as simp behavior. A lot of it I know is joking, and I honestly think that the jokes can be really funny. But at the same time, I think it's worthwhile for us to ask ourselves why we can be so quick to point out and categorize male displays of vulnerability and kind of frame them however lightheartedly and however well-intentioned as subjects of something to clown on or joke about, especially when these displays of emotion and vulnerability are perfectly healthy and perfectly consensual. Obviously, we're having now more than ever critical conversations about the importance of validating men's emotions and making it acceptable for men to display vulnerability and feel a full spectrum of emotions without criticism or judgment. But unfortunately, that is a relatively new conversation. It can be difficult and uncomfortable to deconstruct all of the implicit biases that society has ingrained in us about what to expect from men emotionally and what not to expect. And I think that defaulting to calling perfectly normal, healthy displays of male affection simp behavior can kind of feel like a way to just cut the tension and to ease in and not have to be uncomfortable with something that might seem, because of the way we've been conditioned to think, out of place. But I think it's so much more important to just let men be vulnerable and emotional and affectionate without having to even jokingly associate it to the patheticness and lack of self-respect that is associated with the nice guy trope, with the true simp. Ultimately, I just think that we should aim for a post-simp world. So that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like if you did, and please take a second to subscribe if you want to see more from me or not. That's cool too. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to talk about. I'm really enjoying talking a little bit more about like internet culture. I just did a video about TikTok aesthetics if you haven't seen that. But yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye!